okay, I'm just going to berimbolo everyone. I had some success with it. And then I just thought berimbolos were the shit. And then I realized, I was like, hey, people are starting to shut down my berimbolos. So what do I have now? I've invested all this time in berimbolos and crab rides and things like that, leg locks, but now people know how to defend those things. So I got to go back to the fundamentals. I got to keep working the guards that have been in the game.
What's the most efficient path to victory against this particular opponent?
He's dropping off for the choke here. We could see the finish. It's looking tight. Tight at Alpra.
Hey everyone, what's up? It's Matt. Welcome to the Essential Jiu Jitsu podcast. The Essential Jiu Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu Jitsu, and this week we are going to discuss the fundamentals. I previously did an episode on BJJ for beginners, and this episode will be slightly different. This episode is going to discuss what your coach might mean when they say, hey, you need to work on the fundamentals, or when you hear somebody discuss, quote, the fundamentals of Jiu Jitsu, you might have a better understanding of what they're talking about. Before we get into it, I'd like to ask you to like, share, and subscribe. Leave comments in the comments section. If you want to support the show or contact me, you can follow the links in the bottom. And any support is appreciated. Okay, guys. So look, fundamentals. The fundamentals are all up to perception. I think just like promotions in jiu-jitsu and different belt rankings, there's different expectations depending on who you ask. I am going to be defining in this episode my own interpretation of what is required at each belt level, but really ask yourself, like, okay, what is the definition of fundamentals? So the definition that I have is the main or most important rules of any activity, or the basic things everyone needs to know for a basic activity or skill, right? So in jiu-jitsu, this can mean a lot of different things because it's such a big, vast topic, okay? I think people often say, like, what should they focus on when they're trying to practice the fundamentals? What does this mean in BJJ? Is it a position that they need to work on? Is it an action? Is it a group of submissions or a system? What does that entail? A lot of people consider, closed guard is the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu, or guard retention is the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. Personally, for myself, I prioritize things like guard retention, pin escapes, submission escapes. Notice that these are all defensive situations and defensive actions. So if I'm saying to, the average white belt, or it could be anyone from any rank for that matter, who needs to work on the fundamentals, generally, I would say that this has to do with defensive situations. Not always. There's obviously some offensive things we're going to discuss that people need to have in their arsenal that pertain to the fundamentals, but defensive situations and actions, I think, are kind of the core of the foundation of jiu-jitsu. So I'll just go further and explain, as a coach, my definition of the expectation for each belt promotion. So as a white belt, I think the main thing that you need to do is focus on defense. Okay, build a strong foundation of defense so that you can successfully maintain decent positions. Okay, you might not often get into an offensive cycle versus somebody who's a higher rank than you, but you should be able to enter offensive cycles against other white belts that are your rank, and you should be able to, against people your own rank, not get your guard passed over and over again, be able to escape certain chest-to-chest pins, be able to escape, basic submissions. So if you have the confidence at white belt to be able to have decent defense, you will begin to start initiating offensive game. Without that defensive foundation, if you start to go into your offenses, then you kind of have an all or nothing game. Meaning, if I go for a submission, it might work, but I might also lose it. And then if I lose it, I end up getting my guard passed. This is not good. I want to make sure that if something fails, if I go for a submission and, it doesn't pan out the way I want, that I at least reset to a neutral position. A classic example would be like throwing up an armbar from closed guard, but I didn't properly break my partner's posture. They're posturing out, and now I get my guard passed. This is no good, right? So being able to not get, being able to kind of retreat to a neutral position so that I can keep launching offense as opposed to my initial attack failing and then getting caught in a defensive cycle right away. And also, you should be able to end these defensive cycles. So if you're stuck in a pin, stuck in a submission, you're caught in some kind of an attack, that you're able to actually recover to a neutral position and then initiate offense. So these are kind of the things I'm looking for a white belt. Things I don't look for a white belt would be like, leg locks, barambolos, fancy inversions, even takedowns. I think it's important to have like a, basic understanding of a single leg and whatnot, but you don't need to be a takedown expert. In fact, I think at white belt, you don't really need any takedowns in the sport. I believe your foundation should be from the ground up, and that usually has to do with guarded positions, pin positions, and submission positions. So for me, I like to see my white belts develop a strong, I like to see them develop a strong defensive foundation. Okay. At blue belt, things change a little bit. At blue belt, now I want to see the student start to develop more offense. Generally at blue belt, you need to have the basic upper body submission systems in play, or at least be able to hit these submissions on people your own rank. So Kimura, triangle, arm bar, right? You need to have a basic understanding of these things. You need to be able to sort of fit these things together. I mean, if we're being totally honest, a trained blue belt should be able to wax an untrained person on the street if they got into an altercation. They should, by the time you're a blue belt, or at least a high blue belt, like you should be able to fuck up basically anyone who's untrained and who's your size, in my opinion. And I think by blue belt, having a little bit more understanding of getting offensive with your guard, not just guard retention, but now you're getting offensive with your guard. You're able to start to reverse positions and get into sweeps. You're able to attack from the back. You're able to get to the back of people your own rank. Like I said, some takedowns. But again, nothing needs to really be super fancy. You just need to be positionally sound. And I think the main thing, again, that I prioritize through white and blue belt is guard retention. I always tell my guys who ask me when they're in their blue belt, what do I need to work on? Most of the time it's guard retention and then the ability to grip and create off balances from the bottom position. So if you can do that against blue belts your own rank, I believe that is a good measure of, that you are an effective blue belt, or that you could potentially be ready to move up to the next rank. Now, by the time you're a purple belt, purple belts are pretty high level when you can compare to a non-trained person. A purple belt versus a non-trained person should always kick their ass, and aside from someone who's way bigger than you, or multiple attackers or weapons, etc. One-on-one, hand-to-hand combat, a purple belt should be able to absolutely destroy an untrained person. A purple belt, in a way, compared to, white belts or untrained people, should be kind of like a master, should be pretty much untouchable, in my opinion. So excellent guard retention, submission systems, starting to enter, should have at least a basic ankle lock by blue belt, but starting to now dabble in the other leg submissions, starting to look at no-gi submissions like heel hooks and reaps and things like that. Good finishes on the back, able to pin for long periods of time. Purple belts have to be positionally sound, and I find the standard for purple belts should be pretty high. Generally, purple belts should be pretty reliably able to exit defensive cycles and enter offensive cycles against people their own size and skill. At the time you get to be a brown belt, now you're basically looking at almost black belt level. Internationally, brown belts are very, very high level. Like they're pretty much locally should be able to beat a lot of black belts in your city. The truth is there's just not a lot of good black belts out there in general, but there are some amazing black belts, right? And a brown belt at the international level is basically a black belt, in my opinion. Should be well-rounded everywhere, good understanding of all leg submissions, have some takedowns, good on top and bottom, should have excellent guard and excellent understanding of submissions, submission escapes, all the positional stuff that we talked about throughout the earlier ranks. By the time that you get your brown belt, perhaps you're also looking at how you can contribute to the sport, how you can start looking at being a referee or a coach or working with kids. These are all, parts of the progression of the brown belt. And then, of course, black belt is, like I said, the skills don't differ that much from a brown belt. By the time that you're a black belt, you should be very well rounded in every aspect. I hate seeing black belts who are, really, really great in the gi and awesome at certain things, but they have no leg entanglements. Or, they're really excellent everywhere, but they have no takedowns. Like, that doesn't make any sense. For me, when you're a black belt, you should have at least a couple techniques in every situation in jiu-jitsu. And going further than just your skills on the mat, I think it's important that black belts now start to look at teaching rules. And that doesn't mean you have to be a teacher as a black belt, but I think it's important to have that attitude where you are willing to give your knowledge to people. You're willing to go a little bit extra, a little bit further extra with people that you train with, and you're willing to help move people along and kind of be an ambassador for the sport and have leadership qualities. Again, not every black belt wants to be a teacher. I get that. Not every black belt wants to be a competitor. And so I don't rank black belt on either of those things. You don't have to compete to be a black belt in my gym. You don't have to be a coach to be a black belt in my gym. But I think it's good to give back to people, because people have spent their time over the last 10 or so years building you up. And now it's time for you as a black belt to kind of give back. So it becomes, of course, by the time you get to be a black belt, you have to have skills. That's just part of it. But it goes further than that. There's a character aspect. There's a piece where you're now an ambassador of the sport. You're a representation of the gym, your instructor, and yourself. And I think that's a time when you should be kind of pushing the sport further than it was when you first entered. And this is just all my personal interpretation. There might be people out there who disagree. Leave comments in the comment section, like, what does each rank mean to you? Or if I missed something that you think is worth mentioning, please, I want to hear about it in the comment section. Okay. You also have to ask yourself, do the rules of BJJ, specifically like an IBJJF situation, does that kind of determine what fundamentals are? So what I mean is, in IBJJF, you could literally be a world champion without knowing any takedowns, right? You can't do that in ADCC. And if you want to be a champion in ADCC, you have to have a basic understanding of wrestling. You have to be able to stand with your opponent, because the rules force you to, should it go to overtime. And there will be times when you have to go to overtime. So in IBJJF, you don't even need to do that. In IBJJF, I could just sit down every single match and win. So if the rules prioritize that, then how do you really need to learn takedowns from a fundamental point of view? You just don't need to. So to some degree, the rules that you compete under will determine what the fundamentals are. Let's say your instructor says, so-and-so, you need to have a better grasp on the fundamentals. What does that really mean? Let's get into the nuts and bolts of that, okay? So if I believe that my students need to have these overall fundamental concepts, okay? So these are concepts in the sport of jiu-jitsu that should pertain to everyone. So I believe the alignment theory is super important, right? Rob Bernanke's alignment theory, posture, structure, base. This just helps people understand how to be in a good body positioning. So I think that the theory of alignment is it's kind of a groundbreaking way to look at jiu-jitsu, honestly. Just aside from moves and techniques, it's just about the alignment of your limbs. Do you have good posture? Do you have good base? If you do have those things, you'll be efficient. And the other side of that coin is how to disrupt your partner's alignment, disrupt their stance, make them stumble, isolate limbs, break their posture, etc. Okay, here's another concept that's super important. That's the idea of inside position. So if I'm in the bottom position, I want to seek the inside position so that I don't get pinned. If I'm trying to pin someone on top, if I don't have underhooks and break inside their frames, I can't really pin someone. So really dominating the inside space, whether you're on top or bottom, is super important. And you see this concept manifest in every single situation almost, especially in no gi. Okay, in gi, there's excuse me, there's exceptions to the rule because we're wearing clothes and we can grab the material, but in no gi, you'll never pin anyone who has all their frames on the inside. Doesn't matter how big you are, it just won't happen. So seeking the inside position is a really important fundamental concept. Another great fundamental concept is the idea of creating asymmetrical warfare. So the ability to make the fight an unfair fight. So for example, if I was going to attack you head on, that would be kind of weak. We're even. Your best defense comes when I'm facing you head on. But if I'm able to flank you and move to the side, or even better yet, get behind you, now it's an unfair fight, right? Or if I'm going to sweep you, I don't. This is a concept Danaher talks about. I don't want to sweep you all in one move, and at a higher level, it's going to be hard to just hit a beautiful sweep. There's going to have to be a second aspect where I wrestle up once I've broken your stance. So if I knock you off balance and make you post on the floor, or I make you stumble, and then I start my wrestle up, now you're already off balance, and I'm fighting from an unfair, quote, unfair situation. Right. And just trying to gain small advantages in every situation is going to add up and make you super successful against higher level opponents. So creating that unfair asymmetrical attack, that is a really important part of jiu-jitsu. You could even look at like the idea of kazushi being an example of this, just breaking someone's balance before you throw, before you sweep. As you shoot up a submission, you always want to preface your move by breaking someone's balance. And in this window of opportunity, it's an unfair fight. It's hard for your opponent to defend, and you can launch your attack. So using that initial kazushi to break your opponent's stance is a fundamental concept. And once you understand that, everything becomes so much easier. So this is something that I've actually... I'll talk in this episode about how I've neglected a lot of fundamentals over the years, and this is one of them. And this is the idea of pressure over time. Anyone who's been caught in like half guard passing or mount or even horrible side controls knows how horrible it is to be stuck in a pin and you can't get out. It's like the worst thing ever. You're getting exhausted. Your opponent is essentially just mentally and physically defeating you. And at the same time, they're kind of resting, right? So this became very, very obvious to me when I started watching guys like Gordon Ryan. And I was realizing like, man, whenever he gets to half guard, guys can't recover. And he's taking his time. He's backtracking. He's camping these positions and just chilling. And sometimes he'll even let his opponent recover so that they feel a little glimpse of hope. And then he backtracks to another horrible position for them and he keeps grinding them down over time. And this was kind of game changing for me because I realized, it's not so much about getting my points. It's not so much about getting to the next position as fast as I can or getting the submission as fast as I can. A lot of it is getting to a position of advantage and holding and making my partner answer me. That is such an important thing because when my partner is answering me, I am effectively in the offensive cycle and they're in the defensive cycle. So this is, again, another concept that we want to discuss is the offensive defensive cycle dichotomy. I talk about it all the time, especially for competitors, but I didn't realize the offensive and defensive cycle dichotomy until I was like a brown belt. And once I started to realize that, I thought, that's why sometimes I'm recovering my guard for long periods of time and I can never get my attacks off is because I'm constantly just recovering guard. And it's not enough to just recover. You have to recover and then get into an offensive situation. So gripping and off balancing is an example of that. So using pressure over time to wear your opponent down, if you do this, then by the time you pass their guard and you start attacking submissions, they're already so defeated and weakened and exhausted that the submissions become easier. Once I understood this concept, I really started wearing down my opponents in the training room. My training partners in the training room. And using it in competition is also excellent because you're defeating your opponent mentally and physically before you get to a finishing position. I think a big mistake that is, or at least a common misconception in jiu-jitsu, I'll say, is that we really prioritize the score, right? We prioritize, pass the guard or get to mount. But what we don't say is how we're going to get the student to get to those positions. We just tell them to get there. So they try and get there as fast as they can. They try and rush to those positions. The problem with that is when you try and pass the guard quick and rush to the next pin really quick, your opponent hasn't been broken down yet. And so they have a lot of gas to fight back. But when you break them down over time, it depletes that gas tank. So when they're trying to recover, as you're taking your time to progress to the next position, they have less and less energy to do so. All right, let's talk about like a student's fundamental skills from the bottom position. Again, guard retention, huge. Can you keep your guard? Can you keep your guard in an offensive situation? So a classic example is half guard. Half guard, as a knee shield when you're on your side and you have good frames, versus half guard where your partner is chest to chest on you with crossface and underhook. Two completely different positions. The first one favors the bottom position because the bottom player has frames, whereas the latter favors the top position because they're chest to chest. So even though they're both guards, even though if you're caught chest to chest, you have a guard, it's not really a guard you can be offensive from. So understanding this and being able to not just manage the guard and maintain the guard, but manage the distance and be able to have a guard that is offensive is incredibly important as a fundamental skill. The idea of distance management is like, it's maybe one of the most, if not the most important aspects of understanding how to play guard, is just managing that distance. One of the main things I look at for my white belts is, can they prevent themselves from getting flattened out when they're playing half guard? Because half guard is such a common position in jiu-jitsu, and white belts constantly lose that distance battle and get flattened out in the half guard. So when I see that a white belt is very difficult to flatten out from the half guard, I know that they understand distance management. If I put you in my close guard, it's easy for me to just hold you in my close guard. You can't come forward and get chest to chest without escaping the close guard first. But half guard, you can flatten me out from the half guard. And so we must teach these white belts, even higher ranked belts who have shitty guard retention and distance management. We have to teach them how to stay on their side, keep their frames, dominate the inside space, grip fight, and eventually create off balances. So aside from guard retention, pin escapes is probably the next most important thing. Let's say you're playing that bottom half guard control and you got caught chest to chest. And now we need to be able to escape that pin. Or you got caught in mount. You need to be able to escape that pin. You need to understand which directions you can move to off balance your opponent and then eventually get the inside position back and start replacing your frames. I think it's also incredibly important to be able to use a series of different pin escapes to essentially create defensive dilemmas for your opponent, keep them off balance, and then from there, recover your guard. So maybe you hit a big bridge into a knee lever, into a knee elbow escape, right? Like side to side movements where eventually something gives and you find the inside space. Once you see the bottom player doing things like this, they understand how to escape from these pins. And escaping half guard control, one of the most important things that a white belt can focus on. That's why in our fundamentals classes, which is, by the way, mostly game-based, mostly eco training, we always get the bottom player to be focusing on escaping the half guard. So, making sure that we can definitely escape those pins is incredibly important. All right, now we're going to talk about establishing connections. So establishing connections from the bottom, imagine you're in a neutral open guard, your opponent's over top you trying to pass you. You have to be able to get grips on your partner and maintain those grips. Otherwise, your opponent's going to start flanking you, start passing through the half guard, etc. So being in no-gi situation, mostly we're looking to grip 2-on-1s, looking to grab behind the knees, whatever ankle picks, whatever grips you might do. In a gi situation, the grips are more diverse. So collar, sleeve, pants, etc. Can you keep these grips? Can you change your grips as the situations play out? So as your opponent's disrupting these connections, can you build new connections and maintain them? If the bottom player has no connections, then they have no guard. They have no ability to off balance. So establishing and maintaining those connections is incredibly important. Even for my kids that are in ages 5 to 9, I try and get them to play eco games where we start with the gi grips, like we start with spider grips. And I just say, okay, the top player's trying to get chest to chest. So they're testing distance management. And the bottom player, is just focusing on literally keeping grips. If you watch the very greenest of white belts and you watch kids, they always have weak grips. So you'll put the grips in their hands. And then as soon as they start fighting, they just let them go, right? And so we have to sort of beat it into them. Hey, keep these grips or else you get fucked up, right? You have to make sure that you have something in your hands. And then over time, with enough training like this, the kids start to just naturally find the gi with their hands. So just getting people to make connections with their hands and feet, incredibly important skill in a sport like jiu-jitsu. If you don't have that, you are not playing guard, essentially. Okay, managing the distance, we talked about that. Being able to prevent chest-to-chest pins, being able to dominate the inside space with your frames, constant, inside position battles, super important. And then lastly is creating kazushi. So To become offensive from the bottom, Kazushi is like the foundation of your offensive attacks. So before I do any kind of submission or sweep, I'm always trying to make it asymmetrical. I'm trying to make it an unfair fight for the top person by off balancing them, making them stumble, making them put their hands on the floor, or even better, putting their hips on the floor. Whenever I see people put their hands on the floor, their hips on the floor, it's a great time to now start wrestling up and securing that sweep. So that is incredibly important to understand for a fundamental athlete. But just getting those off balances in different directions and using them in combinations, understanding how to manipulate your opponent's center of gravity, and looking at somebody's body and understanding, okay, now they're off balance. Or for me to make them off balance, I need to do this. A lot of the time, what it is just taking their head or their center mass and moving it over their base of support. If you do that, they have to post out. This is a good time to attack. And so I think a big mistake that a lot of schools do, hopefully they're not still doing it, but I know there's a lot of shitty schools out there, is teaching in moves, okay? And if you teach in moves, you're not teaching those cues as to when the moves could actually work. People just try to do a sweep, but there's no music between the notes. There's no like that side to side off balance until you see that their stance is broken, and then you're attacking. Really what's important, rather than learning techniques, if you believe that there are techniques, what's more important is learning how to break someone's stance and how to keep somebody uncomfortable by constantly breaking their stance. If you can do that, you're going to have good offense from the bottom position. If you can't do that, you're never going to be offensive from the bottom position. Okay, top position. So let's talk about fundamental skills for the student from the top position. First of all, you have to be able to stay on top. You have to be able to maintain your base, and this takes a lot of practice so that you're holding the right posture for whatever guard you're in, and you understand how to not just fall over, okay? And this, again, kids do this all the time. They hold on to someone, they feel like they're getting off balance, and then they just keep holding on, and instead of posting out, they just fall over, okay? We have to teach kids and the most fundamental athletes to post out so that they don't fall. You have to be able to prevent submissions. So if I'm standing in an open guard, you have to make sure that you're not just getting triangled and armbarred by having good structure, good posture, good structure, connecting knee elbow connections, etc., whatever it looks like in the situation you're in, keeping your arms in so that you're not getting kimura'd from the half guard or the closed guard. You have to be able to prevent the most basic submissions from the top position. If you're constantly getting armbarred while you're in the guard, something is wrong with your posture, something is wrong with your structures. If you're on top, you have to force the bottom player to frame. So what do I mean by this? One of the most important things when you're passing, especially half guard passing, is can you make the bottom player feel like they're in the defensive cycle? So if they're gripping you and off balancing you, they're in the offensive cycle. But if you're driving forward with good head position and forcing them to push you away, you're in the offensive cycle. They are now answering your pressure. And what this does is as their frames come away from their body to try and manage distance, we now have created space where we can punch underhooks, pummel to the inside position, etc. So being able to force the bottom player to frame is incredibly important. One of the best things I find that helps me do this is to try and get my head on my partner's chest when I'm passing. If I get my head in my partner's face and under their chin and on their chest, they have to push me away. And it's exhausting for them. As they push me away, I try and take advantage of underhooks, get my knee inside their hip and start passing through the half guard, etc., etc. Okay, can you maintain pins from the top position? Again, this goes into pressure over time. Maintaining pins is something that that wasn't part of my game earlier on. I was more of a movement-based player. Excuse me, I favored more barambolos, back takes, dynamic movements. Now I'm an old fucker. I'm almost 36, so I prefer the old crossface and underhook or double unders, passing through the half guard. Basically, I try and do what I see Gordon do and what GSP did, which is pin people for long periods of time, break them down, and then just dominate them the whole time without using a lot of energy. This is essentially like old guy Jiu Jitsu, right? So being able to maintain pins for a long period of time, incredibly important skill in Jiu Jitsu. And it's never too late to learn this skill. Like I said, I learned this skill kind of late. Once I did it, it's now my favorite thing. Why berimbolo somebody and take their back when I can literally just crush them in the half guard and then pass to mount. And, holding positions like mount for long periods of time. The constant thing that I hear, and believe me, I was there before, is it's hard to hold mount. The truth is, it's fucking hard to hold mount against somebody who knows how to do a pin, which is why you should focus on it. Okay. Mount, I think, is the most dominant position in jiu-jitsu. It's just so morally defeating for the person on bottom against someone who you can't escape mount from. Okay, so I would say, even if you prefer side control, you prefer the back, invest time in getting good at holding mount. Eco the shit. Stay in mount, play games where you're just holding mount, play games where you're trying to submit from mount, play games when you start with an underhook or double unders or head and arm. Like, play these different games and see if you can prevent the bottom player from kipping you over or getting their knees back inside, and just work your mount position. So maintaining pins is a huge fundamental skill. It does take time to develop, but the quicker you teach that to athletes, I think the more efficient their top game becomes. And lastly, I'll just mention the idea of isolating limbs and creating limb extension is a huge skill if we're going to be doing submissions from the top position. As you sort of clear the legs and get access to the center of your partner's body, now you start to work outward again towards your partner's neck and limbs, and isolating limbs and creating that asymmetrical warfare where it's like 2 or 4 of your limbs versus 1 of your opponent's limbs. This is kind of the name of the game, right? And once you do that, you're getting well into submission territory. So isolating limbs and being able to bring limbs away from the body is a huge fundamental skill that we're always looking for. All right, now let's just talk about some overall submission concepts that are very fundamental in jiu-jitsu. So being able to avoid and escape most submissions, or at least upper body submissions. I'm not expecting white belts to be able to, do a heel slip out of a saddle. That is, it's going to be difficult, right? There's better things that we can focus on. And again, maybe that has to do with the rule set, because white belts can't do reaps and heel hooks. But the most common submissions, arm bars, triangles, kimuras, these are the most common submissions, and even to some degree, ankle locks, right? So can they escape these most common submissions? To some degree, they do need to understand how to deal with leg lockers. What a leg locker wants is 2 feet to the inside position generally, so they can get their single leg X and start isolating the leg and going for, at the very least, an ankle lock. So I would say a fundamental skill is learning how to defend the ankle lock, because it is available for all white belts. And man, the ankle lock is such a good submission. I love ankle. It's honestly one of my favorite submissions. Especially now, everyone's expecting heel hooks. A great dilemma to play with the heel hook is the ankle lock. So when you use those 2 attacks in unison, it's super powerful. And if your ankle locks are on point, man, it works at the black belt level. Like, we've seen that with guys like Mikey Musumeci and Isaac Doderlein. Mikey Musumeci, obviously a legend. To be honest, I find his teaching style difficult to watch, but Death from Below is a fantastic instructional. Death from Below really changed how I do my ankle locks. Incredible instructional. I would recommend you check that one out. Another instructional I like, it's very, very basic. It's very short, but it's good, is Jacob Couch finishing leg locks. Okay. So those are pretty good if you want to work on your mechanics. Obviously, the Gordon instructional and the Danaher instructional I highly recommend, because they just go so in depth with the mechanics. Craig's got some great leg lock instructionals and leg lock defense instructional. Get off my legs, gringo. Nowadays, you have to know how to deal with leg locks. There's no way around it, right? The game changes all the time. And if you're not learning how to play legs, or if you're neglecting it, you're going to go into competitions against guys who might not even be better than you, but you're going to lose because they know how to get to legs and you don't know what you're doing. So it's just like any combat situation, any military warfare situation, it's an arms race. And if you're not up to date with the latest technology, if you don't have the technology to deal with your adversary's most current weapon, you're fucked. So you have to know how to deal with leg lockers. And at the white belt level, at least you need to know how to not get ankle lock, because there will be those excuse me, there will be those white belts who are lacking in a lot of areas, but they got a mean ankle lock and they can just blow through divisions because they're going against rubes who have no idea how to defend ankle lock. So I think nowadays it's crucial to have that fundamental skill. How do you do it? Deny the bottom player inside position. split their legs by getting one of your legs inside of their legs. Denying them double inside position prevents them from getting into ashigarami. And then learning how to back step and high step out of the ashigarami and how to safely exit it and turn it into offense is very, very important. All right, we talked about it earlier, resetting the defensive cycle back to a neutral cycle, or even better yet, an offensive cycle. Danaher's got a couple of instructionals. One of them is it's a new wave jiu-jitsu, a new philosophy of positional escapes. The other one is a new philosophy of submission escapes. The main thing that he talks about in these instructionals is as you're escaping pins and submissions, that you answer with counter offense so that you're not constantly like, let's say you're in a pin and you recover, you high leg, and now you've got your frames back, but your partner is now backtracking or they're chaining together passes and you're still just recovering. And so they have you stuck in this cycle of defense where you're constantly just recovering your guard. In a situation like this, you're going to get exhausted extremely quickly. What you need to do is recover your guard, establish connections, start off balancing your opponent and looking to get into offense. Or sometimes when you escape certain submissions, you can enter your partner's legs. You can enter into other submissions off of your escape. So it's better to exit defensive cycles and go right into offense. Do you need to be a master of this at the white belt level? No, but you need to at least be aware of this concept, that it's not just about resetting the cycle to neutral, but more, can we get into that offensive cycle? So just from a very young, early age, I do it with the kids, I do it with my fundamental students, always try to get them to understand the offensive and defensive cycle. I also use the analogy of, let's say a sports team. It could be hockey, it could be soccer, basketball, whatever sport you watch. If one team is dominating in the other team's zone and the other team is just trying to get the fucking ball out of the zone, they can't do it. They can't get that line shift change that they need. They can't recover. They're constantly just, the other team is moving the ball or the puck around the outside, and then the team is just crumbling and turning into shit, right? And then all of a sudden they break down and they get scored on. This offensive cycle is so important in combat sports. Carrying the momentum of the match, making your opponent answer you, wearing them down while you are kind of riding an advantageous position. This is a huge skill. And once athletes harness it, they become excellent competitors. They become very efficient fighters. So that is an important concept to teach from a fundamental standpoint. And I think another thing for fundamental students is being able to chain submissions together. So they're not just going for an armbar, but they understand how an armbar can lead to a triangle. They understand how a kimura can lead to the back, how a kimura can lead to an armbar, how a kimura can lead to a triangle, et cetera, et cetera. Then now they're not just learning moves, but they're learning systems, and they're learning how the systems interplay with each other. That's incredibly important that we can really make that distinction because, jiu-jitsu is a game of systems, and the more systems that you can implement on your opponent when you're attacking, let's say, a kimura triangle. I mean, this is a situation where that person's alignment's completely broken. They're fully in the survival mode, and they're probably going to get submitted. So being able to switch from submission to submission and keep multiple submission systems in play, very, very important and very, very good to understand at the fundamental level. All right, now I'd like to just discuss fundamental skills with training partners. So these are sort of more of like how you're going to go to the gym as a new athlete, or if you're not new to the sport, that just means that you haven't really been socialized very well. But these are kind of like social skills, like things that will make people not hate you, essentially. So first of all, when you're working with training partners, learn how to be a good uke. This is so important. I realized when working with the most green white belts and working with kids especially, there's no concept of being a good uke. It has to be taught to them. So imagine, for example, we're doing drills from the closed guard, or we're doing a technique from the closed guard, and the person receiving the technique just sort of falls over, right? You would never fight like that. And the person on the bottom can't do the move. And the person on top is neglecting themselves of getting good practice for like how they should be positioned when they're in the closed guard or when they're in a submission, right? Even though it's not uke's turn to do the move, the uke still needs to know, okay, if I flop over right now, neither of us get anything out of this. So how should I react? I always tell the kids, when you're learning how to be an uke, make your training partner look good. make it look like you're resisting, but you're not resisting so much that they can't do the technique. You're letting the technique happen. You might even give them a little bit of live looks, like you might you might give them some live reactions, but you're not making it so that the move can't work. Being a good uke, you have to resist enough so that you don't just fall over like a wet noodle, but you have to not resist so much that the tori can't do the technique. Again, this needs to be taught to students, and it quite often they understand the concept, but then you put them in a different position and they do it again. So just over time, teaching people how to be good ukes just makes it so that both training partners get something out of it, right? A lot of the time, even uke denies themselves good training by just flopping over, when really they should be thinking like, okay, in this position, sort of how would I position myself? How would I have good base from the top position? When I'm uke, I almost always take a stance like I'm fighting. Makes sense, right? Your partner needs to feel the body position of their opponent when they're in a good stance. But that being said, when my partner starts to attack me, I don't resist. Okay, you always see those people who they're the uke and then they're just resisting so hard and then the person can't do the technique. And you got to go over and be like, hey, you're not supposed to like not let the move happen. This is almost a designated winner situation. You need to be cooperative enough that the move can work, but you need to not just like flop over and just be a limp noodle. So being a good uke is super important. What about this one? Safety for your training partners and for yourself. Again, when I was in my 20s, I was focusing more on getting good. I was focusing on beating my training partners, trying to learn as many techniques as I could, trying to win the next competition, etc. I still try and do those things, but now it's more about, can I stay healthy? Now that I'm 35, I'll be 36 in February, I'm a black belt. It becomes less about me beating people in the training room and more about me just like getting good training, giving them good training, and staying safe. Because a lot of the time, it's not about who knows more techniques. It's not about who rolls harder or who wins more rolls. It's about who keeps showing up. And if you're injured, you can't keep showing up. So keeping your training partner safe is incredibly important, but also the skill of keeping yourself safe. Most of the injuries that I've had in jiu-jitsu were caused by myself. It was because I had an ego and I tried to do something that I shouldn't have done. Like I waited too long to tap, or I tried to spin out of something I shouldn't have because I didn't want to tap. Or it was me trying to do a move that I hadn't rehearsed and I didn't fully understand. And I fell and hit my shoulder, for example, right? Like, learning how to keep yourself safe is so, so important. You know, if I'm in a body triangle and I can't escape that position and I start to try and spaz out of it, I mean, you got to think this is a position where your body is locked inside your partner's legs, and one wrong turn, you could pop a rib. It happens all the time, right? You see this stuff happen all the time. And so as you mature and you've gone through certain injuries in jiu-jitsu, you realize you're like, oh, I'm stuck in a bad position. Okay, maybe like creating a ton of movement is not a good idea. Maybe I should just sort of sit here for a sec and kind of figure things out, just sort of hunker down and shell up while I work my way out, as opposed to like spazzing out, trying to get out as hard as you can. And before you know it, you hurt your rib or, you twist something. So a lot of the time this comes with experience and just like I said, going through prior injuries is a big part of it. Okay. Common courtesy and BJJ etiquette. So knowing how to not just keep escalating rolls. Like if you're going with your training partner and they're going super, super hard, you have to defend yourself. You have to match the pace, but to some degree, we almost want to kill them with kindness, right? We kind of want to slow things down and try and reel it back, not try and go so hard that we're just keep escalating. It would be like the analogy of kickboxing when two guys are teeing off on each other in the gym and then like one guy lands a really hard shot. And so the other guy feels, hey, I got to return this shot. I got to land really hard. And then before you know it, they're trying to literally knock each other out. This is not good training. In jiu-jitsu, we're lucky that the sport, the gentle art, as they call it, it's not gentle at all. It's actually very, very abrasive. We can train the sport at 100%. We could. Of course, at 100%, I wouldn't recommend it because when you train that hard, injuries can occur. And there's just, I don't think it's 100% necessary to train at 100%. I think training 80 to 90% is better and safer, but you could train at 100% and not hurt each other in theory, right? That being said, being able to de-escalate situations and sort of keep the roll at a good, healthy pace where you can go for 10 more rounds and no one's getting hurt and you can work on your technique, this is really, really important to understand how to do. So again, there is a level of like training that comes with that. You have to be able to de-escalate someone who's going really, really aggressive with you. Basic shit, basic BJJ etiquette. I talked about my 10 pet peeves in one of the previous episodes, bare feet off the mats and things like that. Not moving for higher ranks if they bump in, or if you bump into them and things like that. You're not watching out around you. You're rolling with a training partner and you fall on someone because you were just being neglectful. I mean, these are things that like can easily be avoided. So, leave in the comments section what kind of BJJ etiquette and courtesy things that you think are really important. But basically, if you're new to a gym and you're wondering, okay, like I don't want to stand out as in a bad way. I want to make a good impression. I want to be someone that people like. What should I do? Keep your fucking mouth shut, work hard, listen to your coaches, ask questions, and look around and see how people are interacting with each other socially and try and notice the little cues, right? Oh, not everyone's going hard in this gym. Maybe I shouldn't be the one who's going a fucking 100%. I remember when I was a blue belt, I was late as later in my white belt journey, and also as a blue belt, I believe I rolled too hard. Okay, I didn't have anyone come to me and be like, "Hey Matt, like you need to roll less hard," because at that age I was like 20, 21, and I was like, "Hey, I want to win. Like, isn't the goal to win? Shouldn't I be going hard with my training partners?" It's like, yeah, you should go hard with your training partners. You should try to win, but also, if you're using excessive strength in absence of technique, that's not good, right? And you need to have that like self-awareness to be able to reel things back and be like, oh, it's actually okay if I go less hard because the idea is working my technique. The idea is skill acquisition. It's not my competition performance in the gym, right? So having self-awareness is super important for someone who needs to work on the fundamentals. Am I being a dick? Am I doing things to my training partner that is considered kind of off base or not kosher, right? Got to keep people safe, got to keep your training partners happy. Make it so that people want to drill and to roll with you. If you're that person in the gym that people don't want to train with, I mean, it's going to be hard to recover from that because you start to gain a reputation as a fucking idiot, right? Okay. Look at the gym, the culture of the gym, and the standard that the instructor is trying to set, and consider it like the mission of the gym. Okay, what is the mission of the gym? Some gyms try to have the biggest team or the most kids. Some gyms try to win the most trophies. Some gyms, try to have the best family program. Different gyms have different cultures, and it's generally set by the head coach, and it trickles down through the coaching staff and through the students. So what is the mission of the gym? Does it align with your goals and your values? If it doesn't, consider finding a new gym. But if you're happy with that gym and you're happy with the vision and the mission of the gym, try to contribute to it. Try and be a team player. Even though it's an individual sport, try to clean up after yourself is a great place to start. Again, check out my pet peeves episode. Don't leave your shit around the gym. Try and contribute to the gym. Even, you know what? If you ask your instructor after the training, hey, I'll do the mats for you. Like little things like that go a long way. You don't have to do it. It's not required of you. You're a paying customer, but just little things like that. Or even like if someone asks you a question, or maybe now you've been training for you have 3 stripes on your white belt and a brand new white belt comes in and you're kind of like, hey, I remember when I was that person. Maybe I will give that person a little bit of my extra time and I'll sort of like help them out here or there, try and point out some of the big glaring mistakes I see them do. These things add up a lot and it just improves the culture of the gym. So having the same mission as the gym and the head coach and contributing to that mission is something that your instructors and the coaching staff will really, really appreciate. And of course, when we say fundamentals, students need to be familiar with the most common positions of the sport. That's going to depend gi and no gi. Like, do the fundamentals change gi and no gi? I think nowadays you could say, yeah, they kind of do, because we're realizing that you can't just play a no gi situation the way that you would play in the gi, and vice versa. You can't play gi the way that you would play no gi. Both are very specialized sports with their own intricacies and their own details and their own strategies and their own core movements. The core movements you see in no-gi and the strategies you see, I believe, at least the way that I teach it and the way that I perceive that other athletes and coaches teach it, they're completely different from each other. And so you really, if you're going to be one of those guys that teaches or trains both gi and no gi, you need to understand the differences. The main thing that I notice is no-gi has a lot more inside position. I try to get my no-gi athletes to really prioritize ashigarami as the foundation of their open guard, as opposed to like a De La Hiva situation. Whereas in the gi, you could play more De La Hiva outside guards. You could play collar, sleeve. It's just completely different jiu-jitsu, honestly. And so the fundamentals will change based upon that. Things that won't change, when we talk about the most common positions of jiu-jitsu, they need to be able to get out of half guard pins. They need to be able to play half guard variations. They need to be able to play close guard variations. They need to be able to play butterfly. They need to have open guard theory for both gi and no gi. They need to know how to escape the back, escape the mount, etc. The most common positions in the sport. Do I consider like barambolos and crab rides part of the fundamental positions in jiu-jitsu? No. To me, that is more of an advanced situation, fancy inversions, things like that. But being able to like hold closed guard for a certain amount of time, being able to not get crushed from the half guard, being able to not get immediately passed from the open guard. These are positionally what I think is really, really important in terms of fundamentals. And who can benefit from fundamentals? Honestly, like anyone. Anyone can benefit from fundamentals. You see the best athletes in the world always stressing about the fundamentals. A classic example would be Roger Gracie. So you see guys like Roger Gracie who are, big advocates for fundamentals, and they do the fundamentals perfectly. And fundamentals are, they might seem simple, but they're actually incredibly complex. You could play close guard a lot of different ways, and mechanics play a huge role as to, is your close guard going to be effective or not? So I recommend watching guys like that, like Gordon Ryan, Roger Gracie. These guys are all extremely dominant athletes, and you can really pick up a lot on their perception of the game and how they view fundamentals. But I think, like, for me, being like a purple belt, brown belt, I was missing some huge fundamental aspects. I was missing passing with pressure. I was missing, top pins and things like that. There were a lot of basic things that were missing from my game because I was getting so wrapped up in like, leg locks, barambolas, things like that. And the fundamentals will never go out of style, but like, as we can see, barambolos aren't as common as they were when they first came out. The novelty has worn off. People know how to defend them, but things like close guard will always be effective in competition. Things like half guard are always going to be effective in competition. You're always going to see those things. You're always going to see people going to the back, people going to mount. And so those fundamental positions will never go out of style, and they'll always keep coming back. Half guard passing has been around forever, but now since Gordon started doing it, everyone's camping the half guard. Everyone's using pressure over time. And like I said, some athletes who are incredibly talented at certain systems might neglect the fundamentals because they perceive the sport based on their talents. Okay, as opposed to just sticking with what has been tried and tested and true forever. Again, I use myself as an example. When I was a purple belt, I started learning barambolos, and I was like, man, these barambolos are working on everyone. Okay, I'm just going to barambolo everyone. I had some success with it, and then I just thought barambolos were the shit. And then I realized, I was like, hey, people are starting to shut down my barambolos. So what do I have now? I've invested all this time in barambolos and crab rides and things like that, leg locks, but now people know how to defend those things. So I got to go back to the fundamentals. I got to keep working the guards that have been in the game since I started, and I should have focused on those basic positions more. It's never too late to improve your fundamentals. And even as a black belt, I'm almost a second degree black belt now. I'm still always going back, watching fundamental instructionals, watching Roger Gracie, watching these guys who just do the fundamentals perfect and trying to pick up the best things that I can from there. So let's just lastly finish by sort of creating a plan of action. What can one do to improve their fundamentals? Studying. Okay. I'm a big fan of instructionals, even though a lot of people don't. Watching competition, watching guys who are the best of all time, like I mentioned, in competition and seeing the things they do, seeing the mistakes that they strive to avoid, and how they can get into their positions and hold for long periods of time, incredibly important. Consistency, so showing up as much as you can to the gym, studying, training as much as you can. If you can't get to the gym, you're doing something else. You're thinking about jiu-jitsu, you're working out your body, whatever you can do, you're consistent with jiu-jitsu. It's not just like a once a week thing. It's like a couple times a week you're trying to get to the gym, or you're always thinking about how you can mentally train when you can't get to the gym. Eco training, one of the most important things, guys. If you're not doing like live training, ecological training, and sort of playing with different positions with task focused games, I really think you're denying yourself a huge part of what is actually going to make you and your students good at jiu-jitsu. So just creating some task-focused games is one of the number one things I think you can do to improve in certain situations. Imagine I just said, okay, we're going to roll now. We're going to target spar closed guard. And it's just a free roll from here. Go. What if your opponent stands up out of the closed guard, and now all of a sudden you're getting your guard passed, and then you didn't get any time in that closed guard. Now make a task-focused game where the bottom player is just trying to hold the closed guard. So every time the person stands up, the bottom player and they get out of the closed guard, the bottom player loses. Now, if they lose, we reset in the closed guard. The bottom player is now getting so many repetitions trying to manage their closed guard, and the top player is getting more repetitions escaping the closed guard. So what's happening here? We're concentrating the experience in that one situation. So in this way, you're getting so much live training in these situations. And that is why I believe task-focused games is it's some of the most effective training for anyone. Okay. I'm a big fan of explicit instruction as well, but explicit instruction without task-focused games or without ecological training is just, it's like randori versus kata. Okay. One is just way more effective than the other. All right. I think an athlete needs to assess their weak areas on a constant basis, and have that Kaizen mindset. Okay. How can I improve my systems? How can I improve the things I like to do? What can I do to get better? Where are the holes in my game? If you're getting your guard passed a lot, that's a huge indication that there are some huge issues with your game. Okay, and lastly, this is one that we don't really talk about a lot, and that's the idea of developing mental toughness. That is so important. It's something that we don't really talk about so much, is how to develop mental toughness. Any good jiu-jitsu fighter is mentally tough. There's no good jiu-jitsu fighters or martial artists for that example, or for that there's no good martial artists for that matter who aren't mentally tough. Mental toughness comes from just day in, day out in the training room, grinding it out with your training partners, getting your ass beat, having success, having failures, experiencing the ups and downs of training on a constant basis. And then you become conditioned to it. We become comfortable in uncomfortable situations. And over time, we're able to handle these uncomfortable situations. In fact, we embrace the discomfort as part of the sport. And in a way, we kind of get a sick glutton for punishment type fetish for it. And jiu-jitsu people are commonly known to seek out hard rolls and seek out struggle. It's what we do in this sport, and it's what makes you better on and off the mats. Anyways, guys, I hope that was an interesting conversation for you. Just discussing my interpretation of what are the fundamentals of jiu-jitsu, the fundamental skills, positions, and concepts that every athlete should have. Doesn't matter if you're white belt, blue belt, purple, black, whatever, doesn't matter at all. Make sure that you're focusing on the fundamentals. And if there is that new trend, maybe you see, I remember lapel guard was huge a couple of years ago. It's still very effective, although you could argue what it does to the sport. There's always going to be new guards, new positions, new submissions that come up, and they're a flash in the pan. Everyone needs to learn it, because if you don't learn it, it's so novel that you'll get defeated from it. But then as people start to learn things and they start to adjust their game to these new things that are coming up, they become less and less effective because people learn how to shut them down. And so the fundamentals will always come back in style. The fundamentals will always be there. That is why, we constantly see close guard at the highest levels. We constantly see the same things over and over again, and they're still effective. Other things in competition come and go. The trends that come in jiu-jitsu, they're not always effective. Okay, guys? All right. If you'd like to support the show, please check out the links in the bottom. If you like some EJJP merchandise, please check out the link in the bottom. You can now buy hats, hoodies, shirts, mugs, etc. And I hope you do. If you want to support or contact the show, again, check out the link in the bottom. But that's it for me today, guys. I gotta go. So I hope you appreciate the show. If you do, please support it, and I hope you enjoyed it. Take care, guys. Remember, the Essential Jiu Jitsu podcast is everything you need to know about Jiu Jitsu. Bye-bye for now.